The paramedics were loading him into the ambulance when he grabbed her hand with surprising strength for a man who'd just collapsed. His eyes locked onto hers, desperate and pleading, and he whispered something she couldn't quite hear over the sirens. She leaned closer, her uniform still stained, with his blood from where she'd performed. CPR on the sidewalk, outside the grocery store. What he said next would change everything, but in that moment, all she could think about was whether he'd survive the next hour. If stories like this touch your heart, please subscribe to Sage Stories and hit that like button. We share real stories of kindness and connection that remind us of the good in humanity. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time someone's kindness changed your day. Maria Santos had exactly $17 left until Friday, and it was only Tuesday morning. She stood in the cereal aisle of Save Mart, calculating in her head whether she could stretch one box between her two kids for the rest of the week if she supplemented with the oatmeal at home. Her nursing scrubs felt tight after her double shift at Mercy Hospital, and her feet ached in shoes. She'd wrestled in twice because new ones weren't in the budget. Being a single mom and a nurse meant choosing between being there for your patients and being there for your children, and lately it felt like she was failing at both. She grabbed the generic brand cereal and was heading toward the checkout when she heard a strange sound. A heavy thud followed by scattered gasps. She turned to see a man in an expensive suit crumpled on the floor near the produce section, his body jerking slightly. Without thinking, her training kicked in. She dropped her basket and ran toward him, her exhaustion forgotten. People stood frozen, staring. She dropped to her knees beside him, quickly checking for a pulse. It was there, but irregular and weak. His face had gone gray, lips tinged with blue. Heart attack. She looked up at the gathering crowd and shouted for someone to call 911. Then immediately began chest compressions. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. She counted in her head, pushing down hard on his sternum, feeling his ribs flex under her palms. Someone mentioned they'd called for help. She kept going, sweat breaking out on her forehead. The man's eyes fluttered open briefly during her compressions. Unfocused and frightened, she kept her voice calm and steady, telling him he was going to be okay, that help was coming, that he needed to stay with her. She'd done this countless times in the hospital, but somehow doing it here, on the cold linoleum floor of a grocery store, felt different, more raw, more real. When the paramedics finally arrived, she'd been doing CPR for nearly 8 minutes. Her arms burned and trembled as she briefed them quickly on what had happened and what she'd observed. They took over efficiently and she stepped back, suddenly aware that everyone was staring at her. The store manager approached, thanking her profusely, asking if there was anything he could do for her. She shook her head, retrieved her basket from where it had fallen, and quietly went to pay for her groceries. Her hands shook slightly as she handed over her crumpled bills. She didn't think about the incident much after that. Life was too full of immediate concerns. Her son needed help with his science project. Her daughter's school shoes had a hole wearing through. The electricity bill was due. She picked up extra shifts when she could, came home exhausted, helped with homework at the kitchen table, and fell into bed only to do it all again. 3 weeks later, she was pulling a double shift when the hospital administrator appeared at the nurses' station looking for her. Her heart dropped. Had she made a mistake with a patient? Was something wrong? He smiled and asked if she could come to his office when she had a moment. The knot in her stomach tightened. When she arrived at his office, she froze. Sitting in one of the chairs was the man from the grocery store. He looked completely different now. Healthy color in his face, wearing another impeccable suit, very much alive. He stood when he saw her and she noticed his eyes were kind, warm brown with small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often. He introduced himself as David Chen, and he told her he'd been searching for her for weeks. He'd been visiting from Seattle, meeting with potential business partners, when his heart had given him what his doctor called a serious warning. Without her intervention, he wouldn't have made it. He wanted to thank her properly, to do something meaningful. She felt uncomfortable with the attention, insisting she'd just done what anyone would do, what she was trained to do. But he shook his head firmly. Most people freeze in emergencies, he said. Most people don't drop everything to save a stranger's life. What happened next felt like something from a movie. David had done his research. He'd learned about her situation, about her struggles as a single mother and nurse. He'd set up a trust fund for her children's education. He'd paid off her car, He'd arranged for a scholarship in her name at the hospital's nursing program. She stood there in the administrator's office, tears streaming down her face, unable to process what she was hearing. It was too much. She couldn't accept it. But David was gentle and persistent. He explained that money wasn't the point. The point was that she'd given him his life back. She'd given him the chance to see his own daughter graduate from college next year, to walk her down the aisle someday, to meet grandchildren he might never have known. How do you put a price on that? How do you say thank you for literally giving someone their future? Over the following months, David kept in touch. He'd travel to town for his follow-up cardiac appointments, and somehow those visits always included coffee with Maria. They'd talk, for hours about everything. Their kids, their fears, their dreams they'd tucked away because life got too hard. She learned he'd built his software company from nothing, driven by the same determination that got her through nursing school as a single mom. He learned about her late husband, about the drunk driver who'd taken him 6 years ago, about how she'd chosen nursing because she wanted to help people, the way the nurses had tried to help her husband. Their friendship deepened into something neither of them had expected. David started looking for reasons to visit. Maria found herself thinking about him during her shifts, smiling at texts he'd send. Her kids adored him, especially when he showed up with pizza and offered to help with homework he was hilariously bad at. There was no dramatic declaration, no movie moment. It grew quietly, steadily, like trust built on a foundation of genuine connection and shared values. A year after that day in the grocery store, David relocated his company's operations. He said it was strategic, better for business. But Maria knew better when she saw how he looked at her. How he'd found a way to be part of her daily life rather than a visitor passing through. When he finally asked her to dinner, really asked her, not just as friends but as something more, she said yes without hesitation. Their story reminds us that kindness creates ripples we can't always predict. Maria saved David's life that day in the grocery store, but in the years that followed, he'd argue that she saved him in ways that had nothing to do with CPR. And Maria, who'd spent so long just trying to survive, found that sometimes the people we help end up helping us right back in ways we never imagined. Love wasn't something either of them was looking for that Tuesday morning, but it found them anyway, born from a moment of pure compassion when someone chose to act instead of standing by. The next time you see someone in need, remember Maria's story. Remember that a single act of kindness, one moment of choosing to help, can change multiple lives in ways you cannot predict. You don't need to be a trained nurse. You don't need special skills. You just need to care enough to act. Share your own kindness stories in the comments below. Let's remind each other that good people are everywhere, doing extraordinary things in ordinary moments.